Florence Schaffner was used to having traveling businessmen trying to pick her up. Came with the territory, young, attractive flight attendant in the early 70s. It happened all the time. So when the polite, well-dressed gentleman in seat 18E quietly passed a folded note as she walked by, Florence just smiled, flirtatious, professional. The smile that said thanks, but no thanks. She slipped the unopened note into her handbag without even looking at it and took her seat in the jump seat at the rear of the plane, just after row 18. Florence watched another attendant moving down the aisle, checking on passengers, making sure everyone was settled in for the short flight from Portland to Seattle. Florence noticed the man was still watching her. Dark suit, black tie, sunglasses, even though they were indoors. He looked like every other businessman on the Thanksgiving Eve flight, briefcase in his lap, calm, composed. He leaned forward slightly. His voice was soft, polite. "You may want to read that note, ma'am." Florence looked at him, still smiling, but now a little confused. He nodded toward the handbag. The note? You should read it. Something in his tone made her reach for her bag. She pulled out the folded paper and opened it, and the smile on her face disappeared instantly. The note was handwritten, neat, clear block letters. "Miss, I have a bomb, and I want you to sit with me. November 24th, 1971, Thanksgiving Eve, Flight 305, and the most famous hijacking in American history had just begun." Holy moly, guys. It sounds like this flight attendant might be in some trouble here. Welcome to another episode of the Southern Drawl podcast. We're happy you guys are enjoying the story. We're going to jump right back into it just a second here. But first, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share also with anybody that you think might like this sort of thing. Leave in the comments what you think about this flight attendant. What would you do if you were in her situation? Would you sit down? Would you cooperate? Would you fight back? Let me know in the comments. Let's jump right back into the story and find out how this flight attendant handles things right here on the Southern Drawl podcast. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 was a short hop, barely 30 minutes in the air. It was a Boeing 727, 6 crew members, 36 passengers, most of them headed home to Seattle for the holiday weekend. It was supposed to be a routine evening flight, in and out, easy. Florence Schaffner and her fellow flight attendants had done this 1,000 times, greeting the passengers, checking their tickets, making sure that everyone's buckled in, serve the drinks once they're in the air. That night, Florence worked the aisle, welcoming passengers as they boarded. Businessmen in suits, a few families, a couple of college students, all flying home for Thanksgiving. And in seat 18E, a man in a dark suit and sunglasses, mid-40s maybe, average height, slick back dark hair, quiet and polite. He didn't stand out at all. He ordered a bourbon and soda once they were in the air, paid cash, said thank you when Florence handed it to him. Just another businessman on just another flight. But all that was about to change. Florence read the note again. "Miss, I have a bomb and I want you to sit with me." Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. She kept her face calm, stayed professional. She sat down next to him. Florence looked up. The man was still watching her, still calm, still polite. He opened his briefcase just enough for her to see inside. Wires, red cylinders, a battery. He closed it. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. The man's voice was steady, matter of fact, like he was ordering from room service. "I want $200,000 in $20 bills. I want 4 parachutes, 2 primaries, 2 secondaries. I want a fuel truck standing by in Seattle when we land." He paused and took a sip of his bourbon. Florence nodded and quietly did as he instructed. After making the flight crew aware of the unfolding dilemma, the pilot contacted authorities on the ground and they immediately began working to fulfill the demands. The hijacker patiently lit another cigarette as he casually and politely chatted with another flight attendant about random everyday mundane topics as the flight soared high above the state of Washington. The plane would go on to land safely in Seattle. The other passengers were completely unaware of the historical moment they'd just been unwitting participants in. Authorities worked quickly to comply with all the hijackers' demands. Once the money and the parachutes were loaded and the plane was being refueled, the passengers were allowed to disembark, still unaware of the reasons for all the delays. The hijacker sat quietly in 18E, polite, patient, sipping his bourbon like he had all the time in the world. Once the refueling was complete, the hijacker ordered the plane back into the air, bound for Mexico City. 200,000 cash, 3 cockpit crew members, 1 invested flight attendant, and 1 ambitious hijacker. Flight 305 took off again at 7:40 p.m. with 5 people on board. He told the crew to fly low and slow, no higher than 10,000 feet, airspeed no faster than 200 miles per hour. Flaps down, landing gear down. He sent everyone to the cockpit and told them to stay there. Then he went to the rear of the plane and he opened the aft air stair door. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the wilderness of southwestern Washington, a warning light flashed in the cockpit. The rear door was open. The crew felt the plane lurch slightly as the air pressure changed. Captain Scott keyed the intercom. "Is everything okay back there?" No response. Tried again. Silence. Crew flew to Reno, Nevada, the nearest airport, and landed just after 11 p.m. FBI agents boarded the plane immediately. They searched the cabin, the galley, the bathrooms. The hijacker was gone. All that remained was his clip-on tie, a few cigarette butts, and 2 of the 4 parachutes left behind, unused. He had jumped. Somewhere over the Cascade Mountains, in the dark and freezing rain, 15-degree temperatures, wearing a business suit and loafers with a $200,000 cash strapped to his body, he jumped and he vanished. The FBI would launch the largest manhunt in history. They searched thousands of square miles of wilderness, interviewed hundreds of suspects, followed thousands of leads. They never found him. In 1980, a young boy found $5,800 in decaying $20 bills buried along the Columbia River. Part of the ransom money. But that's it. No body, no parachute, no trace. To this day, the case remains unsolved. The only unsolved hijacking in U.S. history. And the man who did it, well, he became a legend. D.B. Cooper jumped out of that plane and straight into the pages of history. Not as a criminal, as a legend. People wrote songs about him, made movies, sold t-shirts, celebrated him as a folk hero. Why? Because he was polite? Because he didn't hurt anybody? Because he was calm, collected, and pulled off the impossible. He became the gentleman hijacker, the everyman who stuck it to the system and got away with it. We love that story, don't we? Robin Hood, Bonnie and Clyde, and of course, D.B. Cooper. The criminal with a code, the thief with honor, the bad guy we can't help but root for. But you know, D.B. Cooper terrorized innocent people. He built a bomb and threatened to blow up a plane full of passengers. He held a flight crew hostage for hours. He risked the lives of about 40 people, folks who just wanted to get home for Thanksgiving because he wanted money. And we made him a hero. There's a verse in Proverbs that's been rattling around in my head since I started reading up on D.B. Cooper. There's a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. That's Proverbs 14:12. We have this dangerous habit of romanticizing sin and evil and the bad guys of the world. We look at someone who's charming, polite, well-dressed, and we think, yeah, well, he ain't that bad. We see someone stick it to the system and we think, good for him, someone had to do it. We watch someone get away with it and we think, man, that's impressive, inspiring. But sin is sin, an inevitable downward spiral. Doesn't matter how polite it is, how charming, how clever. D.B. Cooper committed a federal crime. He put innocent lives at risk, and whether he survived that jump or he died in the woods, the outcome is the same. The wages of sin is death, Romans 6:23. So why do we do this? Why do we cheer for criminals when they're likable or when it furthers a political agenda? There's a common misconception that some sins are better than others. That if you're polite enough, charming enough, smooth enough, maybe the punishments won't apply to you. But God doesn't grade on a curve. He doesn't look at D.B. Cooper and say, well, at least he didn't hurt anybody. He looks at the heart, at the intention, at the action, and he calls it what it is: sin. Here's the thing, though. If D.B. Cooper had lived, if he'd jumped that jump, spent that money, lived out his days in peace, and maybe he did, he still would have died. Maybe not in 1971, maybe not in the woods, but eventually, we all do. You can steal $200,000, you can outsmart the FBI, you can become a legend. But you can't outrun death, and you certainly can't outrun God. Hebrews 9:27 says, it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. Why do folks seek momentary, fleeting comfort now when the cost is an eternity of torment? It leads to a love for the world, and the world loves the gentleman criminal. But God loves the repentant sinner, and the difference between the two is everything. D.B. Cooper jumped out of a plane with $200,000 and became a legend. But legends don't save you. Jesus does. And unlike Cooper, Jesus didn't run from the law. He fulfilled it. He took the punishment, paid the price, and offered you the only escape that actually works. Not a parachute and a bag of cash, but grace, forgiveness, life. So here's my question. Who you rooting for? The smooth-talking criminal who got away with his crimes, or the savior who took the hit so you wouldn't be punished for yours? Because one of them's a legend, and the other one is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But only one of them can save you, brother. That's right, guys. Only one of them can save you. That's the gospel. That's the good news if you haven't heard it. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Southern Drawl Podcast. We're so glad to bring you this content, guys. We ask that you would help us out by sharing the content. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. It's free to do so, by the way. Guys, we love you. Until next time, be free, be blessed. Peace. Blindly walking, I'm so lost, gone for quite some time, forgetting all that I once loved, feel like I died, hope is gone away. Fingers cold and numb, eyes fade into white, darkness overcomes, bleeding from this pit.